Hello! This is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for Chapter 9 of Yarn Tales. Yarn Tales is my ongoing series here at Hooked by Happenstance where I read books, I tell you a bit about them, and then I apply silly Kendra rules and add that reading experience into a reading shawl that I'm crocheting, which is acting as sort of a book log of all the things that I've experienced through physical and audio books this year, and is helping me to make a tangible product from reading, which usually doesn't have a tangible product, and so I don't always put the value on it that I should. But I should be valuing these things even if I listen to them via audiobook, because I have found that books give me a different sensation than other, audio means. Listening to a podcast or music have a different effect on me mentally and emotionally than listening to books do. So I count audiobooks the same way that I do all the others, and they all get included in my reading shawl. So today we're here to talk about the 9th book I finished this year. I finished it a little bit ago, and it is called Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, C-H-O-I. Out about this book from a video by Nicole Sweeney. Sweeney Says, who does Snark Pod and numerous other things around the interwebs. And I was watching one of her videos, and she did a little bookish summary of things I think that she read in January. And I put most of the things that she talked about on to my TBR, and they all are in different versions of being waitlisted with my library services. So the book that came in first was Emergency Contact, which is the story of two young people. They're in their 20s, and through a series of events and people and relations and things, they end up meeting, and some things happen, and they end up becoming each other's emergency contacts in their phones. So then they begin to correspond via text message. So I had heard, that was basically what I had heard in the review I'd heard. And that made me assume this is going to be more epistolary, more like a book that is written in a series of letters, kind of, only those are going to be text messages. But that is not the case. This book did an interesting job of weaving the text message interactions with actual, plot of people in real life interacting and dialogue and all those things, which is something that I frequently find is missing from epistolary novels. There's not a lot of dialogue because there's no one to talk to. It's all in a lettered format. And I had been thinking that was what I was getting into, but that wasn't what happened. I found the book really enjoyable. It dealt with a lot of different issues, a lot of issues about self-acceptance and just being too hard on yourself, and some relationships, both familial and romantic, and it was just a really interesting batch of characters, and not interesting in these are way off the wall, which a lot of the books I've experienced lately, it's interesting because they're colorful in a weird way. They're a lot of experiences that are not realistic, but this book covered a lot of very realistic but interesting characters, and I just really enjoyed it. I listened to it via audiobook. I got it through RB Digital, and I listened to it on my phone, and I listened to it one night while I was working on sewing stuff, and I was cutting out pieces to make a quilt for my daughter's birthday, and so it kept me company through a lot of that. I actually listened to it over several days. The beginning took me a little while to get into, but then once I got into the book, it just kind of went along, and that was really, really pleasant. So my star rating for the book was, this was a 4-star book. It was enjoyable. Was it perfect? No. There were some plot points that I think could have been tighter, or that I would have enjoyed more if there'd been a little more explanation of. But overall, the book was just really good, and I would recommend it. If this sounds at all interesting to you, the concept, I would definitely recommend it. Also worthy of note, the characters are of Asian American descent, and so there's some dealing with that, and how some expectations within family structures based on that, and just interactions between one another, which I found really interesting. So if you're somebody trying to read more diverse literature, more diverse perspectives, more diverse authors, this might be something that you want to add, unless you're already reading a lot of that stuff, and then I guess it's not more diverse than what you're used to reading. Okay, let's take a peek at the shawl. So the way I'm working my shawl is there are different yarns for different kinds of books. I have a particular yarn for books I experience with my kids, a yarn for books that come with my Life's Library book subscription, books that I'm listening to via audiobook, and then physical and ebooks have their own color. I just kind of got through a section of the shawl where I went on a binge of audiobooks, and hello, there's another one of those coming up. Because of that, I used up the rest of the yarn that I had been using for my audiobooks. So I will tell you a little bit more about the yarns in a second, but I want to show you the shawl now. So here is what it looks like. Basically, the configuration I'm using is each yarn type also has a pattern row that I picked for the different yarns. Each of them is different by the yarn types, not per book. And then after the pattern section, then there's a number of textured single crochet rows to delineate the number of stars that I gave the book. So you can kind of tell by looking at the stripes which books I enjoyed more than others. Now, what I ended up doing, you can see right here, is I had enough yarn to get through the pattern section of this book, but I did not have enough to get through the stars or even through multiple rows of the star rating. So, since it broke up in the middle of the first row, I pulled back and I just did the pattern row. And I switched to a different yarn. And I was looking in my stash, trying to figure out like what I could use, because these yarns so far have all been DK. I didn't have any more DK yarns that matched, and these were all yarns that had been gifted to me of various, most of them kind of what I think was like high-end fiber contents. The yarn that I had been using for the audiobook sections was this, which is Ravelry fibers in the Embrace base. It's 100% Tibetan yak down in the color Summerberry. So I have been using that, and I used it all up. Well, I have a tiny ball left. I have this much left, which I will keep for another purpose, or maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I haven't finished the shawl, so I don't know what I will need at the very end. Maybe this will come into play then. But for now, it's just hanging out in the bag with the other things. But I needed something to continue on with. And I was looking in stash, and I had some yarn that I had been gifted previously. I gotten this particular yarn. I got the Ravelry Fibers yarn for my birthday from Carla, but previously she had sent me some yarn that I was going to make a cardigan out of. But when I was working on it, I realized that I was not going to have enough to do what I had been planning. So it has been sitting in a bag in the naughty corner, waiting for me to decide what I was going to do or what I was going to add in with it. But I realized that I'm reading a lot of audiobooks, so it would behoove me to use a yarn that I have a lot of and that I really like, because I am likely going to add a lot of stripes of this to this shawl. So this is the yarn that I chose to use. It is shepherd's wool from Stonehenge Fiber Mills in Michigan. It's a worsted spun fine wool. It has a number 4 on it, so it's like a worsted weight. And it's in the color violet. And I have like 6 skeins of this, so I have enough. I definitely won't run out. But this is a worsted weight, but it's working out to be close enough in gauge that I don't think it'll be a problem for the shawl. The way I kind of accommodated that is I did slightly less increasing through this first stripe of the yarn than I had previously, and I think that it will be fine going forward. It blended in really nice. The main reason that I kind of didn't add quite as many increases was because I was fading out of the last pattern. But going forward, I should be good to go. And so the rest of the audiobooks will be in this color. I also think it's kind of a nice change up, a nice variation. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the process of making this, both from a reading standpoint, which has been really enjoyable. Making this shawl has been really pleasant. The rows are already getting quite long. It still is, I'm still growing it a little because it's still not quite the size that I'm looking for, but the process is just really nice. The whole thing about this is really nice, and it's good for me, and I think that it might be something other people would be interested in doing, making some sort of craft to mark books and things that you're reading. I've talked to people about maybe making socks, if that's a thing that you like to do. Maybe you like pick some sort of either color change so you can make stripy socks, or a pattern differentiation based on star rating, or just to delineate books. Like if you're going to consider it like a 1 or 2 star book, you only put 1 or 2 rounds of whatever color and then you switch. Or however, you can make up your own silly rules. Making up silly rules makes crafting really fun, and you can craft whatever rules you want. So anyways, if you would like to see more of these Yarn Tales videos, there is a playlist here on the channel, as well as a playlist for the shawl that I made last year, which was using a different format, but still talked about books that I read then. If you would like to see more of these videos, I suggest that you subscribe down below, because I do put out my content intermittently, so that's the best way to make sure that you don't miss when I decide to upload. And I will see you all next time.